Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Rambles, I think is the official name of this show now, where we're getting into a real rambly one. It's been a little bit since I've done one of these episodes, let alone one that's going to be truly this rambly, because I literally have no notes, just a series of thoughts that woke me up at 4 in the morning, and I crawled out of bed and wrote down a note so I wouldn't forget to do this, because it's eaten me up. Oh man, okay, I don't know what I actually ended up naming this episode, but it's probably something along the lines of the Ouroboros of digital waste or something like that. Because this is connected to a lot of other topics I've talked about before in previous episodes of this and in general, and general thoughts I've had that you've probably heard from me before on the topic of YouTube and platforms and content creation and that sort of thing. But it was triggered for me by one particular incident that just happened a few days ago, and it's been eating at me. So, for those of you who have been on the internet for some amount of time, I expect I am not alone in having multiple accounts for multiple different platforms and having curated the way that algorithmic suggestions work very deliberately so that you don't get a lot of garbage filling up your suggestions on various platforms. YouTube is, at least for me, the biggest one in that sense. I don't spend a lot of time on a lot of other sites that would feed me a lot of other suggestions. And so I'm rather protective of, let me not have a sidebar full of awful things that YouTube really wants to show me for clickbait. So sometimes I open up a video that somebody sent me or that I find somewhere that I don't want to end up influencing my algorithm. And so occasionally I open things up I open up YouTube in incognito and I see things, and every time I do it, which isn't that frequently, but it happens enough that it happens frequently enough that I've seen an evolution over time of just how bad things have been and seem to be getting as far as what constitutes content and what the state of algorithmic suggestion has become. I'm going to assume that whatever's happening on YouTube algorithmically is fairly similar to what's happening on a lot of platforms in terms of their money-making intentions and the mentality they have towards feeding people content to keep people on their platform. That's been the number one thing for the longest time, is keep people on the platform so that they're watching ads, so that they're making the owners of the platform money, right? That's not inherently bad. However, I think everybody has probably had the ongoing experience, even if you've only been on the internet or YouTube for a few years now, of seeing that experience get worse. The ads get worse. The ads get more aggressive. They get more gross. They get more absurd, and sometimes they just get absurdly long as well. I apologize if there's noise in the background. There are people with leftover fireworks, I guess, who have decided now's the time. So anyway, the story starts with me opening up a video that I didn't want influencing my suggestions, and then seeing in the sidebar what kind of horrible things YouTube does to people who are not signed into YouTube and what it suggests for them. And I saw a video that was just so ridiculous that I had to be like, okay, how is this possible? Because what it was like, I think it was like, and please don't go look this up. Don't feed them a watch or anything like that. It was a video that was something along the lines of baby finds dog cemented into a wall. Okay, that's absurd, right? That's not real. That's not how real things happen. Then you look at the thumbnail and it's literally like a picture of a dog that's like with its body partially just sticking out of a wall, like it no-clipped through a wall, and there's a baby standing in front of it. And you go, okay, well, with the current state of things in current year, and in this case I'm actually going to say 2025 because well, specifically July 2025, because the rate at which these things change these days really seems to be accelerating. You go, okay, somebody has generated an AI picture. Then I look at the watch time, or the duration, and it's an hour and 50 minutes. And I'm like, okay, this can't be, this has got to be just trash, right? And a lot of these things that YouTube sometimes feeds you in the sidebar when you're not signed in are just, they're garbage. They're like 0 view, like single view type things. I say that my stuff is single view, but anyway, I put actual effort in mine. It's just content farm. And so I assumed it was going to be a fairly low number, because surely nobody would be clicking on such a video because it's clearly absurd beyond belief. And I look at the view count and it's like 750,000 views in a couple of days. So you can't see me shaking my head and blinking my eyes right now, but that was my reaction. I just shocked at, okay, what's going on here? So it piqued my curiosity, and I was like, I have to know what's algorithmically and technically going on with this. There's no way that 750,000 people thought this was real, and based on, you know, how I know generally that YouTube counts views, you don't get a view count if somebody clicks on your video and watches 10 seconds of it. It doesn't count. So those are, I mean, depending on how you want to define a real view, those 750,000 are not people just clicking out of curiosity and immediately clicking off. Those are people who watched some not insubstantial amount of it. So I have to know. My morbid curiosity gets the better of me, and being already an incognito, so this horrible thing doesn't influence my algorithm, I go ahead and open it. And what it ends up being is, it's pretty apparent within like a few seconds. Somebody has, in some various order of how these operations work, but it's some version of all of these operations, somebody has given a thought. I'm going to assume it starts with the title, that somebody just comes up with a title, or maybe the title itself is generated by AI as well. But the title being baby finds dog cemented in a wall and what comes next, blah, 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 usual clickbait type of stuff. I'm going to assume that then fed 2 directions into AI. It fed into a picture generation to generate the image that is then in the background of that video, big air quotes, and then it fed it into a generative AI for text, which then created a script of a story. Now, I didn't stick around to find out how coherent it was, because it was very immediately obvious that it was incoherent. But it also picks up with that script, whatever it was, and I don't know if it was actually a 2-hour script or it was on like a 5-minute loop or whatever, but that script was then clearly fed directly into AI voiceover, which was then rendered into the file to create a video. So this whole thing from top to bottom appears to be completely AI generated. And it's got an enormous amount of views. So rather than expose myself to that horrible, not real content, I scroll down to the comments, and it's very apparent very quickly and there's thousands of comments, right? In a couple of days since it was published. There's thousands of comments, and it's very clear, like, they're very formulaic. A lot of them like have excessively formal language and things like that, but they're not all AI. And that's what's more disturbing and kind of sent me on this whole thing. So the fact that there are fully AI generated things being fed into content farms that then generate their own views so that they can trick the algorithm into believing this is real content, and then lots of bots also feed into the comments section to let people believe that like there's actual people commenting on this, and then real people get looped in because the algorithm feeds it to them. That's a huge problem on its own, but that is not the full scope. And I'm not going to let this whole video blow way out of scope, but I needed to give you the whole story for how this connects to all of my other thoughts here. this is nightmarish for a bunch of reasons, because I look in the comments and there are people who are clearly not AI, who are genuinely somehow on some level believing that some of this content is real. Maybe they only watched a few minutes, maybe they don't understand. Like, there's a lot to be said for general people's cognition and their ability to identify what's fake and real, what's a real image or a real voice or these other things. That's a whole like biomedical, psychological, sociological thing that could be unpacked, but I'm not going to get into that. The fact fundamentally that it is genuinely tricking people is a huge concerning indicator for the state of people's education in some part, but it's also in a bigger way just a concern for what does this say about the state of our platforms, that people are being fed this stuff and being there, it's trustworthy enough, it's treated as trustworthy enough, and not for like, you could call those people just ignorant or stupid, but that doesn't really get to the depth of what's going on here. There is a level of trust given to a platform, and while you would hope that common sense is common, the longer I live, the less I believe that to be the case. And so in an effort to protect people from themselves, this is a concern and the kind of thing that ought to have some safeguards. Now, the like sociological and fake media implications of this are very concerning, and are much more concerning when you take something that's a story that's much less fake looking than dog cemented in wall found by baby. Because we're in a media landscape these days that is very hard to parse, and sometimes people are have a lot more finesse and a lot more clever with their writing, and twist reality in ways that is far more believable, close to the truth but not actually truth, in order to sway people's perception of things, and often sometimes for I shouldn't say that. Sometimes for malice, but more often for not, it's for profit. And that's the whole thing here, whether it's on YouTube or any other platform, even TV and like general official big air quotes channels for media. It's a very big concern that people do not have the wherewithal, the ability to pick out what's real and what's fake, and that there aren't safeguards to prevent the people who can't from, finding things that are just lies. But this gets to this is where I dip my toes into the bigger issue here. I have complained a lot about platforms. I've complained a lot about YouTube and all these other media delivery platforms and the way that they run their operations and the way they monetize their systems and all these things, and how we're going to focus on YouTube here, but this applies more broadly to other things I've talked about, platforms like streaming services and other things like that, in an official capacity. YouTube is in the middle, very clearly in the middle, and has been in the middle of a crisis for a long time as far as how it is monetized, how it makes money, and how it sustains its services without running an enormous deficit. And historically, as far as I understand it, is basically always run a deficit. It's never been profitable. And there are good reasons for that, or there are good reasons and good concerns from Google for why that may not be going the way they want. But I'm not going to let them raise any of those issues, because they are number one, before everyone else, to blame for this issue. Especially when they do not moderate more aggressively the content on their platform, when they do not adequately mark or warn of generated content. Actually, it's funny, in the description, it's really buried in there, but in the description of that video, there was actually a marker generated by YouTube to indicate that this was fake content. or that this was, sorry, I believe the term that was on it, I should have taken a screenshot, was digitally manipulated content or something to that effect. But buried in the description box is not sufficient safeguarding. But Google and Alphabet and YouTube are to blame for this. We've got a platform that is floundering because people want to watch. They need to make money, right? They need to make money in order to run the platform at all, to keep the services up and pay for the servers and electricity and all of that. That's normal. So the way they do that is with ads and or with direct payments. But the ads have gotten more and more absurd, as previously mentioned, and more aggressive. So even the premium, like if you buy premium, you still get ads at certain tiers. So they're still like collecting money on multiple levels there. And they have the additional problem of AI is being fed into their ad system. So if you happen to watch YouTube these days, or a lot of other things, and you see ads, there's a lot of AI ads out there that are just scams that have just been generated to generate clicks so that they can feed people to malicious sites to get them to click on stuff so that people can be scammed in one form or another. But Google is at the forefront of AI. They are one of a couple of companies who has been most aggressively pushing generative AI and other AI platforms as a feature. I've been getting messages from Google for years now about the AI features that they are working into their platform and asking me to pilot stuff, which I refuse to do. And they're, a lot of it is just marketing. It's like there's AI generation for thumbnails now, which I'm not freaking touching. I can do my thumbnails myself, thanks. And all these other things. And the way this all connects back together is when you have a platform where your algorithm is being gamed by generative AI and just trash content that is then being watched by bots, which is then feeding more and more loops of power consumption. AI requires enormous amounts of power to run. So you have power consumption there. Then you have power consumption to, like, at each step of the AI to generate that video, whether it's the image, the title, the text, the voice, the rendering, which is probably, the rendering doesn't have to be AI, it's just rendering. But that requires energy too. And then to upload it to the platform, that uses up storage space on YouTube's platform. And then every view that gets viewed on that, whether it's real or fake, is using energy and like time on CPU cycles on Google servers and all these other things. And so what you have is just one big loop of shit that is cycling throughout this whole system, consuming energy and time and hardware and all of these other things, and money, Google's money, YouTube platform money. And it is generating the death of the internet. Because like I said, this is not limited to YouTube. You've probably seen, if you're a savvy internet browser, how many sites are out there now that are just generated by AI, completely useless websites where you, like, especially if you go looking for reviews for products or something like that, the number of websites that are just basically clones of each other. All of these sites are just generated by AI, which the person who creates the website just says, make me a website listing the best 10 of this item, and it just goes to whatever vendor, like Amazon or something, looks up the top 10, then looks up the text reviews for those top 10 items, then generates summaries for them, then parses them out into a form, and then throws up, vomits, literally throws up that whole website onto some random, some random domain name. And then that generates garbage search engine stuff. And so it's almost impossible to find a legit review or a legit website or a legit anything these days, because all of the search results are full of garbage sites that aren't anything. They're not created by real people. They're just trash. And all of that feeds back into resource consumption. And then all of that resource consumption leads to loss of jobs, because like there's no reason to, or it's harder and harder to warrant hiring journalists when your website gets no traffic, your real news website gets no traffic, and the real reviews get no traffic because they're fighting against 10,000 AI sites by comparison. And it causes real degradation to people's livelihoods and incomes and ability to live meaningful lives and buy decent products and all these other things. And on top of all of that energy generation, and I'm sure you've seen news if you're a vaguely tech savvy individual, all of that energy use has spiked, like energy use nationwide and worldwide by massive scales, because everybody's in this war to generate content, to generate money, just to get one up on the next guy, to get there first so that they can get the clicks and they can get the ad revenue. These fractions of pennies, just wasting money in this, again, this Ouroboros of garbage that is just feeding into itself, causing nonstop waste. And to be perfectly honest, I don't even know where I was going with this thought, other than I just needed to scream into the void, because I don't know what we're doing anymore. I don't expect anybody will see this video and find it amazingly illuminating, but if it does, send it to somebody else who might care about it. But we're in such a landscape of everything in society these days, it seems like, where reality is buried under piles of garbage, where trying to get real knowledge is harder than it ever is and less appealing. People are less interested in being knowledgeable than it seems than ever it is. And maybe that's just me getting a little bit older, and I'm not even that old. But what a nightmare time and place and technology level and social state to be living in these days, when you can't believe anything and everything's getting worse, because the only way a platform can make more money is to make itself worse, which makes its own platform more useless, which makes it less appealing to use. And it all runs in circles in a downward spiral. Sorry if this one was too much of a bummer. I just didn't know what to do with it anymore. These thoughts run around in my head all the time, and this felt like a vaguely cogent summary of a lot of what's going on in modern media. If you've got thoughts, leave them in the comments. But not if you're a bot. If you're a bot, fuck off. I've been the Social Solipsist. I'll see you guys next time.